In the heart of the bustling city of Millhaven, where the blur of faces never seemed to slow and the streets were alive with endless chatter and traffic, Olivia Reinhardt felt a haunting sense of isolation. A recent college graduate, Olivia had moved to the city for a fresh start, leaving behind her small hometown and its close-knit community for what she hoped would be an exciting new chapter. Little did she know, her life was about to turn into a nightmarish tale of obsession and fear. It began subtly, almost innocuously. While walking home from her job at a local bookstore, Olivia noticed a man across the street. He was tall, dressed in nondescript clothing, his features obscured by the shadow of a hood. At first, Olivia thought nothing of it. After all, seeing strangers was part of city life. But then, she saw him again the next day, and the day after that, always at a distance, always watching her. With each sighting, a chill crawled up Olivia's spine, her mind racing with questions. Was she being paranoid? Was it just coincidence? She decided to test her theory. Taking a sudden turn down a less traveled alley, Olivia glanced back. The man turned too. Her heart pounded as she quickened her pace, darting through a series of turns, and yet, every time she looked back, there he was. Terrified, Olivia confided in her friend, Jenna, who worked alongside her at the bookstore. Jenna, pragmatic and protective, suggested they report it to the police. The officers took down their statements with practiced detachment, assuring them they would keep an eye out, though there was little they could do without more to go on. The next few days were uneventful, and Olivia began to relax, thinking perhaps she had overreacted. That sense of security shattered one evening as she was closing the bookstore. The last light clicked off, and as she locked the door, she saw him standing across the street, perfectly still, his gaze fixed on her. Panic surged through her veins. She fumbled with her phone, trying to dial for help, but her hands trembled too violently. Rushing back inside, she called Jenna, who arrived minutes later. Together, they watched as the man finally moved, disappearing into the darkness. Jenna stayed over that night, and the two made plans to vary Olivia's routine, hoping to confuse her stalker. The next week, Olivia stayed with Jenna, altering her commute and avoiding walking alone. But the sense of being watched never left her. She started noticing things, small, inexplicable occurrences like her things being slightly out of place, or her apartment door feeling slightly ajar when she was sure she had closed it. Determined to gather evidence, Olivia bought a camera and began recording her walks to and from work. The footage was grainy and often hard to make out, but one evening, as she reviewed the day's video, her blood froze. There he was, the man in the hood, captured on video, following her at a distance. She hadn't seen him that day, or so she had thought. With this new evidence, Olivia went to the police again. They took the footage and started an official investigation, but as days turned into weeks with no word, Olivia's life became consumed by fear. She jumped at shadows, the slightest sounds making her heart race. One night, as Olivia stayed late at Jenna's place, discussing what to do next, her phone rang. The number was blocked, but she answered, desperation overcoming her caution. "Hello?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Silence on the other end, then, a distortion of static, and a voice, chillingly calm, "You look tired, Olivia. Maybe you should sleep more." Her breath hitched, fear gripping her like a vice. The voice continued, "I'll be watching, making sure you're safe." The line went dead before she could respond. Shaking, Olivia showed Jenna the missed call log, the evidence of her stalker's reach. They decided it was no longer safe to stay in the city. Plans were made to leave Millhaven, to go somewhere he couldn't find her. But as Olivia packed her things, a sinking feeling gnawed at her. She was being driven from her home, her life uprooted by an unseen force that refused to let go. That night, as she and Jenna prepared to leave, a storm brewed outside, the wind howling like the wails of the damned. As they loaded the last of the boxes into Jenna's car, Olivia's eyes caught movement across the street. There, standing in the shadow of a flickering streetlight, was the man. He wasn't looking at her this time. His gaze was fixed on something, or someone, behind her. Turning slowly, Olivia's eyes met Jenna's, wide with terror. Jenna whispered, her voice trembling, "He's not alone." From the shadows emerged more figures, each one indistinct yet unmistakably menacing. The group moved with a coordinated deliberateness that made the scene feel like a choreographed dance of shadows. The wind picked up, carrying with it a chorus of whispers, as if the storm itself was speaking in tongues. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest, her breaths coming in short, sharp gasps. She realized with a sinking dread that her situation was far worse than she had feared. It wasn't just one person stalking her, she was the target of an entire group, a network of watchers whose motivations were as obscure as their identities. Jenna grabbed Olivia's arm, pulling her towards the car. "We need to leave." "Now," Jenna hissed, urgency lacing her words. They scrambled into the vehicle, slamming the doors shut just as the first figure reached out, their hand thudding against the window with a dull thump. Jenna turned the key in the ignition, the engine sputtering to life as another figure emerged from the swirling mist, joining the first in their pursuit. The car's headlights flicked on, casting long, eerie shadows across the group that now blocked their escape. Each figure was hooded, their faces obscured, adding to the surreal nightmare that the evening had become. With a determined yell, Jenna slammed her foot on the accelerator. The car lurched forward, its tires screeching against the wet pavement. The figures jumped aside, narrowly avoiding being hit, but they were quick to recover, chasing after the car on foot with unnatural speed. Olivia looked back, her eyes wide with terror as she saw the group diminishing in the rearview mirror, but knew they were not safe yet. "Drive to the police station," she gasped, her voice shaky. Jenna nodded, her face set in a grim line as she maneuvered the car through the deserted streets of Millhaven, the storm raging around them adding to the chaos. As they drove, Olivia's mind raced. Who were these people? Why were they after her? The reality that her life had become a horror story was almost too much to comprehend. She felt a mix of fear, anger, and confusion, each emotion battling for dominance. When they arrived at the police station, the building was a beacon of safety in the night's madness. They rushed inside, nearly colliding with Officer Harlan, who had been one of the detectives looking into Olivia's case. His surprise at seeing them in such a state quickly turned to concern. "We were attacked," Jenna blurted out, her words tumbling over each other. "By a group of people. They've been following Olivia." Officer Harlan ushered them into an interrogation room, promising to get back up and start a search immediately. As they recounted their story, Olivia's phone buzzed. Hesitantly, she pulled it out, her hands trembling. It was another blocked number. With a deep breath, she put the phone on speaker. The voice that came through was distorted, almost robotic. "You cannot escape. No matter where you go, we will find you." The call ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in the room. Officer Harlan's expression turned grave. "We need to keep you here, under protection, until we figure out what's going on. This is bigger than we thought." Olivia and Jenna exchanged a look of despair. Being in the police station offered a temporary respite, but the threat was far from over. They were caught in a web they didn't understand, one that extended beyond the reaches of their immediate perception. As night deepened, more officers arrived, and the station became a hub of activity. Despite the flurry of movement and the assurance of safety, Olivia felt a creeping dread. The storm outside seemed to intensify, mirroring the turmoil she felt inside. Hours ticked by, and with each passing moment, Olivia's anxiety grew. The idea of being hunted, watched, and followed had shattered her sense of security. She wondered if she would ever feel safe again, if life would ever return to normal. As she sat in the fluorescent-lit room of the police station, surrounded by the hum of activity and the steady drip of rain against the window, a cold realization settled over her. This nightmare was far from over. There was much they still didn't know, and the depth of the conspiracy against her was yet to be fully uncovered. Outside, the wind howled, a mournful, angry sound that seemed to speak directly to Olivia. It whispered secrets in a language she couldn't understand, secrets that promised more terror, more revelations. And somewhere in the darkness, the figures who had pursued her were regrouping, planning their next move. The night was long, and the storm was far from over. As the clock neared 3 a.m, the storm outside the police station seemed to reach a feverish pitch, its winds howling with a ferocity that rattled the windows. Inside, Olivia sat hunched on a hard plastic chair, her eyes fixed on the slow drip of water leaking from a crack in the ceiling. Each drop echoed unnaturally in the otherwise muted surroundings of the station, mirroring the relentless tapping of her own heart against her ribs. The storm, it seemed, was not just a meteorological event but a harbinger of the chaos that had engulfed her life since she noticed the man stalking her. Now, with the addition of the group, a palpable sense of dread filled the air, thick as the fog that lay outside. Officer Harlan entered the room again, his face etched with lines of concern. "We've got patrols out looking for any sign of your pursuers," he informed them, his voice a low rumble against the storm's wail. "CCTV across the city is being monitored. We'll find them." Olivia nodded, though the gesture was hollow. The systems and protocols meant to reassure her felt flimsy, almost inconsequential against the backdrop of what she'd experienced. Jenna, sitting beside her, reached over to squeeze her hand, a silent show of support that felt like the only real thing in a world gone mad. "Have you ever heard of anything like this before?" Jenna asked, her voice hushed as if afraid to raise it above a whisper might invite darker truths. Officer Harlan sighed, his eyes scanning a file on the table before him. "Honestly, no. This level of coordinated stalking it's unprecedented." "But who are they?" Olivia's voice cracked, the strain of her ordeal wearing on her. "Why me?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Harlan replied. "There's more at play here than we initially thought. This isn't just a case of an obsessed individual, it's organized, calculated. It's as if you've stumbled onto something much larger, something," he paused, searching for the right word, "sinister." The room fell silent, the only sound the continued tapping of rain against the window. Olivia's mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Her life had been normal, uneventful even, until the stalking began. What could she possibly have stumbled upon that warranted such extreme attention? The door to the interrogation room swung open abruptly, and a young officer stepped in, his expression grave. "Sir, you need to see this," he said, handing a tablet to Harlan. The video on the screen was grainy, footage from a street camera. It showed a group of hooded figures, their movements eerie and synchronized as they traversed an alleyway. The timestamp was from just an hour ago. "They're still out there," the young officer said. "Moving like phantoms. No confrontations, but they seem to be searching for something, or someone." Harlan looked up at Olivia, his eyes serious. "We're moving you to a secure location. It's not safe here if they decide to make a move." Panic fluttered in Olivia's chest. "A secure location? What about Jenna?" "We'll ensure she's safe, too," Harlan assured. The preparations for their transfer were swift. Olivia and Jenna were led through the bowels of the station to an unmarked vehicle, its windows tinted dark. As they drove through the desolate city streets, the storm seemed to crescendo, lightning streaking across the sky, illuminating the rain-drenched world in flashes of stark, white light. Olivia peered out the windows, her eyes searching the darkness for any sign of their pursuers. But the night was impenetrable, a blanket of black broken only by the occasional streetlight. The car pulled into an underground garage, the sudden silence startling after the noise of the storm. They were ushered into a building so nondescript it could have been anything from an office block to a government facility. The interior was stark, the walls bare, the air tinged with a clinical sterility that did nothing to ease Olivia's growing sense of foreboding. In a small, windowless room, Olivia sat with Jenna, waiting for what would come next. Officer Harlan entered, a folder in his hands. "We've pulled together something you might need to see," he said, laying the folder on the table before them. Inside were photographs, articles, and documents, all relating to an obscure cult known for its belief in the supernatural powers of surveillance and control. The more Olivia read, the colder her dread became. The door to the room locked with a click, sealing them in. As Olivia turned the pages, the light overhead flickered ominously, casting long shadows across the walls. Jenna leaned in, her voice a whisper. "Do you think they're part of this cult?" Olivia nodded slowly, a sinking feeling in her stomach. The documents outlined the cult's belief that certain individuals could unknowingly hold keys to ancient, mystical secrets, secrets that could be unlocked only through extreme surveillance and ritualistic following. The profiles of past targets read eerily similar to Olivia's own experiences, suggesting that her ordeal was part of something much larger and more horrifying than random stalking. As they absorbed the information, the room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with the weight of unseen eyes. Olivia felt the oppressive sensation of being watched, not just by the cult but by something even more ancient and malevolent. Officer Harlan paced the room, his own anxiety palpable. "We're doing everything we can to protect you, but this cult, they've evaded law enforcement for decades. They're like ghosts, leaving nothing but fear in their wake." The flickering light above them suddenly went out, plunging the room into darkness. Olivia and Jenna clutched each other, their eyes wide as they tried to adjust to the sudden blackness. A low hum began to fill the room, a sound that seemed to come from the very walls, vibrating with a sinister intensity. From the darkness, a voice whispered, chillingly close, "You cannot hide." The door slammed open, revealing a brief silhouette of a hooded figure before the light flickered back on. But the doorway was now empty, the fleeting presence gone as quickly as it had appeared. The room felt breached, the illusion of safety shattered. Olivia's heart raced as she realized the depth of their peril. The cult was not just watching, they were steps ahead, manipulating events to their will. The police, despite their intentions, had underestimated the cult's reach and power. Harlan drew his weapon, moving to the door with a cautious determination. "Stay here. Lock the door behind me. I'll check the perimeter." Once he left, the silence that enveloped the room was suffocating. Olivia and Jenna huddled together, the folder of documents spread out before them, a map of nightmares that now targeted them directly. Minutes dragged into what felt like hours. The hum in the walls grew louder, more insistent, as if it were trying to communicate something indecipherable. Then, the lights flickered again, a strobe effect that disoriented and terrified. In the brief moments of darkness between flickers, shapes seemed to move just beyond the edge of vision, flitting through the room like dark wraiths. Jenna squeezed Olivia's hand, her voice trembling. "What do they want from you?" Before Olivia could answer, the room settled into total darkness once more, the hum escalating into a high-pitched scream. The sensation of being watched intensified, turning the air thick and heavy, almost suffocating. Then, silence. The oppressive atmosphere lifted momentarily, replaced by a colder, more calculating presence. A new voice, clear and menacing, spoke from the darkness. "The key lies within you, Olivia. You cannot escape your destiny." The light surged back to life, revealing the room unchanged except for the open folder on the table. The documents seemed to taunt them, the photos of past victims staring back with hollow eyes. Olivia stood, her resolve hardening despite her fear. "We need to end this," she declared, her voice steady. "Whatever it takes." Jenna nodded, her face set in grim determination. They knew the night was far from over, and their survival depended on unraveling the secrets that bound Olivia to this ancient, sinister cult. As they prepared to face whatever came next, the building shook slightly, as if in response to Olivia's declaration. The storm outside had not abated, and now it seemed as if the very forces of nature were conspiring with the darkness that sought to claim Olivia's fate. The final confrontation was imminent, and as the night deepened, the boundaries between the seen and unseen, between the hunters and the hunted, blurred into a terrifying unknown.